Hello and good Zangmo. Well, it's 5:05 and according to our agenda, we're going to start our program. Good Zangmo and hello everyone. On behalf of Evaluate Bhutan, I would like to welcome everyone to our first webinar. We are indeed very excited about this program. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the team. I am Sonam Chodin and with me I have Tashi Chodin who will be also moderating the session and Dechen who will be looking after the technical aspects of today's program. Before we start the session, I would like to provide an overview of Evaluate Bhutan and what we do. As in any country chapter, the Evaluate Bhutan aspires to serve as a platform for young and emerging evaluators across Bhutan. Evaluate Bhutan aims at promoting young evaluators in taking a critical role of nation building through the strengthened culture of evaluation in Bhutan and beyond. Therefore, to kickstart with our first program, we are organizing this webinar on the role of monitoring and evaluation in achieving sustainable development goals and gross national happiness. Gross national happiness is a development philosophy propounded by His Majesty the King of Bhutan, King Chhimi in 1970s. The concept of GNH has often been explained by its four pillars: good governance, sustainable socio-economic development, culture preservation, and environmental conservation. These four pillars are further supported by 9 domains, which include psychological well-being, health, education, time use, culture, culture diversity and resilience, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity and resilience, and living standard. The domains represent each of the components of well-being of the Buddhist people, and the term well-being here refers to fulfilling condition of a good life as per the values and principles laid down by the concept of gross national happiness. With a brief overview of Evaluate Bhutan and development philosophy, gross national happiness, may I now request Tashi to take us through the program. Over to you, Tashi.
Thank you, Sonam. Thank you, everyone, for joining this event. Before we start the program, may I remind all the participants to mute your audio and video. Should you have any queries and comments, please post it in the chat box. So we will definitely come back to you at the end of each sessions. It's an honor to host our esteemed speakers for this very interesting webinar. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Will Parks, who will be highlighting on why M&E are crucial for SDG and GNH. Dr. Will is a dynamic leader and successful team coach for the last 27 years in 43 countries. Dr. Will has directed the design and management of programs that achieve strong results for children alongside building the capacities of communities, government, civil society, academic, business, media, and international agency. He specializes in economic policy, public health, communication, and evaluation. Dr. Will is currently the representative for UNICEF in the Kingdom of Bhutan. Before this, he was the representative for UNICEF in the Islamic Republic of Iraq. To date, he has authored and co-authored 32 publications, including books, book chapters, and journal articles, as well as presented at 40 international conferences and workshops. So may I request Will Parks to take over? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonam and Tashi, and a warm welcome to everybody who's connecting in, both in Bhutan, but also from different countries outside of Bhutan. It's my pleasure to present here. I've shared with Young Evaluation Bhutan a short paper, and I'm sure they will share that afterwards, so I'm not going to have a PowerPoint. If you don't mind, I'm just going to speak to some of the points that the paper outlines. So what I'm going to focus on is the question, why does monitoring and evaluation of the SDGs matter? And much of what I talk about hopefully also applies to the concept of measuring gross national happiness. My short presentation considers 3 parts. Firstly, I'll provide a quick overview of monitoring and evaluation, the 2020 agenda, and the SDGs. In the second part, I'll consider the importance of data for SDG decision-making, and I'll outline some of the challenges of SDG monitoring and evaluation. In the final part, I'll explore how to go about designing evaluation frameworks for the SDGs, and also outline what evaluation questions I might pursue if I were an up-and-coming evaluator when it comes to the SDGs. And as I mentioned before, much of what I cover, I think, applies equally well to the concept of gross national happiness. So let's begin. M&E, as many of you know, is a process or processes by which we identify trends, we measure changes, and we capture knowledge in order to improve program performance and increase transparency. No, I just explained, colleagues, I'm not presenting any slides. I have shared a paper which will go out after this presentation. I think today's world, we live in too many PowerPoint presentations virtually. So, monitoring and evaluation aims really to assess the effects and progress in terms of advances towards the generation of public policies and improvements in people's livelihood, focusing on outcomes and especially not just on activities. In 2015, world leaders adopted the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As many of you know, the 2030 Agenda introduced 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, and these set out a transformative plan for people and planet. The 2030 Agenda aims to promote prosperity, environmental sustainability, and progress on sustainable development that leaves no one behind. Realizing the ambitions of the 2030 Agenda requires a whole-of-society approach. Governments, citizens, civil society organizations, academia, and the private sector all have roles to play in contributing to sustainable development outcomes. The 2030 Agenda is grounded in commitments to transparency and accountability. Within each of the 17 SDGs are a range of targets, 169 targets to be precise, that provide the basis for a roadmap of action. Progress towards these targets is being measured through a set of globally harmonized indicators for monitoring performance. The targets laid out by the SDGs serve as guidelines to help governments at all levels to develop implementation strategies and allocate resources accordingly. The SDGs are not meant to impose an additional layer of policies on top of current ones, but rather to serve as a compass for aligning country plans with their global commitments. Let us turn now to some of the challenges of data and M&E in relation to the SDGs. From my experience, data is the lifeblood of decision-making for the SDGs. Ever since they were adopted, the principal questions on the SDGs for many have been, how do I choose the right mix of interventions? How do we make sure we are implementing these interventions right? How do we know if we are achieving the goals? The scale and scope of the 2030 Agenda present a challenge for countries to effectively monitor and evaluate progress. Given the Agenda's 232 indicators, many observers have called for a data revolution to support its implementation. There is a need to ensure that efforts are informed by evidence and that necessary data are available to track progress and promote accountability. The data revolution has led to an emphasis on strengthening national statistical systems, exploring ways that unofficial data can support 2030 Agenda implementation, and promoting overall accountability for implementation through the generation and use of more and better data to track progress. So what are some of the challenges to SDG monitoring and evaluation, and by extension to gross national happiness as well? The following are just some of the challenges that I have experienced and are not meant to be a comprehensive list. Monitoring and evaluation progress within the SDGs poses several challenges, firstly for local and subnational governments, as there are many possible local differences, including geographical, socio-economical, and governmental, which make it difficult to select globally applicable and meaningful indicators. A second challenge is that the whole of society approach to 2030 agenda implementation raises several implications. It raises questions of how contributions by non-state actors can be monitored and evaluated and included in reporting processes, as well as whether unofficial data can play a role in addressing gaps in official data. Efforts to monitor and evaluate progress on the 2030 agenda should make use of existing systems where possible to reduce reporting burdens. Monitoring implementation of the 2030 agenda through existing reporting processes is indeed a good practice, including reporting by government institutions and specialized independent bodies such as human rights commissions. Integration entails collecting data for SDG indicators through existing surveys and developing new surveys where needed. But as I'm sure you all appreciate, integrating the SDGs into existing systems is another challenge. Investments. Mute your mic, please. Thank you. Investments in capacities to fill data gaps pose another set of challenges, including investments by national governments and international development partners to generate high-quality disaggregated data, support national statistical offices and community-led monitoring processes, and ensure that data users are equipped to use data to inform decision-making processes and ensure accountabilities. M&E systems are increasingly relying on mobile technologies, social media, and satellite data. M&E insights must be timely too. Procedural and technical innovations are needed to disseminate useful knowledge quickly, so investments in these areas pose further challenges to be overcome. For most countries, leaving no one behind requires additional investments to reach certain communities and work with them to generate the data needed to track progress on the 2030 agenda. The availability of disaggregated data such as gender, disability, ethnicity, age, etc. is critical in this regard, particularly in terms of understanding who is being left behind and tracking progress for specific vulnerable communities. Establishing mechanisms to coordinate the 2030 agenda monitoring might represent a final challenge. Coordination mechanisms bring together official and unofficial data procedures at national and subnational levels to identify data gaps and establish innovative partnerships to fulfill them. So, as I conclude, how best to go about designing evaluation frameworks for the SDGs? The International Institute for Environment and Development, the EVAL SDGs Network, Finland's Ministry for Foreign Affairs and UNICEF released a guide in 2020 to design SDG evaluation frameworks around national contexts. The guide outlines 4 steps of evaluation development and design. These 4 steps include, firstly, identify the overall objective and use of the evaluation by consulting and engaging with different stakeholder groups, such as civil society organizations and parliamentarians. Secondly, prepare for the evaluation by designing participatory processes, defining the scope and focus of the evaluation, and identifying the policies and plans to be evaluated. The third step is to use the 2030 agenda principles, such as universality, equity, and leave no one behind, to inform the evaluative criteria and use the principles to develop the evaluation questions. And lastly, frame the evaluation according to the logic of national policies and develop and cost a communication plan. Finally, if I were an up-and-coming evaluator, what evaluation questions might I pursue when it comes to the SDGs and by extension, gross national happiness? The World Bank Group has offered a useful structured overview of some of the key evaluative issues and questions around the SDGs, organized around 3 different levels of analysis: global level, country level, and the policy intervention level. So at global level, evaluation questions might include: to what extent are international organizations advocating for the SDGs and supporting national actors to embed the SDGs in their work? To what extent are international initiatives on the SDGs effectively influencing awareness, attitudes, and behaviors of key actors across the countries? To what extent are sustainable development issues and their interlinkages perceived as priorities by different countries? What are the main exploratory factors? More specific questions at country level include, for example, how relevant are the SDGs and corresponding indicators and targets at the country level? To what extent have countries integrated the 3 pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, international policy, and including national development plans? To what extent have countries developed coordination mechanisms for integrating SDG-related issues into program design and implementation? And to what extent do these mechanisms effectively include private sector and civil society actors? A second dimension of interest in the context of evaluating the SDGs at country level concerns the nature of the evaluation system at the country level. Relevant questions are, for example, what is the state of institutionalization of evaluation itself? How is evaluation organized within and across sectors? And what are the capacities of evaluation stakeholders? What are the opportunities and constraints for conducting cross-sectoral evaluative exercises? And what are the opportunities and constraints for evaluation to influence decision-making? Lastly, evaluating SDG indicator data availability at the country level might include questions such as: what is the availability of data on the indicators of the SDGs at country level? What is the periodicity of data collection? What is the quality of the data? What are the capacities of national organizations to collect relevant data? And what are the opportunities and constraints for doing so? At the policy level, there are perhaps 2 dimensions we can look at. Questions that I would be asking include: which interventions work and under what circumstances in terms of contributing to the achievement of SDG-related targets? What is the interconnected nature of causal processes, potential trade-offs or win-win situations between 2 objectives of a specific intervention? The nature of causal processes affecting SDG-related indicators and the timing and sustainability of effects. The second dimension is about policy coherence. To what extent is a particular policy intervention part of a broader integrated policy framework or approach that considers the interconnected nature of interventions and the processes of change they may influence? To what extent is there some type of coordination between actors in relation to a particular intervention? And to what extent are the efforts and objectives of a set of interventions aligned with each other or possibly working at cross purposes? In this short presentation, I've provided a quick overview of monitoring and evaluation, the 2020 agenda, and the SDGs. I've then considered the importance of data for SDG decision-making and outlined some of the challenges of SDG monitoring and evaluation. Lastly, I've explored how to go about designing evaluation frameworks for the SDGs and outlined what evaluation questions I might pursue if I were an up-and-coming evaluator when it comes to the SDGs. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Sonam and Tashi.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for interesting session and sharing all the words of wisdom on monitoring and evaluations and importance of data for SDG decision making, and outline some of the challenges of SDG and monitoring and evaluations. This might really benefit our participants here. So I'm sure that we would like to get back. Now we would like to take some comments and questions. So may I now request my colleague Sonam Chodin to take us through the questions, please, Sonam.
Thank you, Dr. Will and Tashi. We don't see any question posted in the chat box, but I would like to encourage the participants, if you have any questions regarding doctors' presentations, can you unmute yourself and then ask the question? We can take in a couple of questions since we have time, so we encourage you to participate. If you're not comfortable speaking up, you may put your question in the chat box and we will read it out for everyone. Do we have any questions for Dr. Wills? Since we don't have any questions right now, if you want to ask any questions to Dr. Wills, you can put it in the chat box. We'll take it later, or maybe you can write to us at evaluatebhutan@gmail.com. We'll collect all the questions and then we will request Dr. Wills to answer it later. So since we don't have any questions, we'll move to next speaker. Thank you, Dr. Will. Jeshi, over to you.
Okay, before we proceed, we would like to take a group photo. So therefore, please turn on your video. Can you all turn on your video, please? Dechen, let us know when you are done. Just taking a picture. Take picture. Thank you. You may turn off your video. Okay, now I would like to invite our next speaker, Madam Dechen Zangmo. She has 10 years plus experience in evaluation and research, and she works in UNICEF. She works extensively in developing and providing technical support to complement and manage all the evaluation, assessment, research commissioned or conducted by UNICEF and partner agency. She has worked in evaluations and research capacity development activities in the country and supported the conduct of series of training. She is also the co-founder of Evaluation Associations of Bhutan and has worked closely with the associations to build the capacities of the partners on evaluations. Over to you, Madam.
Madam Dechen, can you unmute yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I understand that there are other participants from other countries, so it might be a little bit late evening or maybe early evening for the rest. I'm not sure which countries are participating. However, I would like to thank everyone who has joined for this webinar. I hope you will find it useful. It is actually a great pleasure just to ensure that you hear him properly. I'll put off the video and then we can highlight on the presentation. Understanding that all the participants are young and new to the fields of evaluation, I kept my presentation very, very simple. So my presentation will be on 3 parts. I divide it into 3 parts. One is on the evaluation. So what is an evaluation? The second one I'll touch briefly on what is an SDG and how SDG is related to GNH, the Gross National Happiness Indicators. And I'll also try to give an example because it's very important that you know how practically how you evaluate a program. So I will try to also give in case example of how evaluation can help evaluate SDG 5, which is the gender equality. So with the permission of the organizers, if anybody is interested, I would like them to, raise their hand or unmute yourself as the presentation go ahead so that we remain very participatory. Is that okay, La? Tashi, Sonam?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so please keep a watch on who would like to speak as I go ahead. So basically, I think it's important to know what is an evaluation. If you need to, if you want to evaluate any program regarding SDGs or even for that matter, any development program. So what is an evaluation? I don't want to read the slides, but if anybody wants to explain evaluation in their own words, please unmute yourself, La. Just give your thoughts on what could be an evaluation. I know there's a slide there, but don't look at it so that you know. Anyone, La? In your own thoughts, we do evaluation daily, right? So in your own thoughts,
I would
okay,
like to
great.
share my,
Thank you, Pinso, coming in. Please go ahead.
to me, evaluation is a process through which we could find out whether an initiative is best fit for the people.
Yes, thank you. She didn't read the slides, so good. So anyone else? Your own thoughts on what could be an evaluation, because as I understand, the participants are all wanting to become hardcore evaluators. So I think this is one baby step for you, everyone. Anybody wants to come in? Okay, no. So I read this slides then. And evaluation actually, is a bit different from other researches. It's a very systematic and it is very impartial. Two components of the evaluation is that it is systematic, okay, and it has to be very impartial. When we do evaluation in UNICEF Bhutan Country Office, we keep the program people away from the evaluation so that they don't influence any kind of findings. So it could be, evaluation could be on a project, even on an activity, a program, a policy, a theme, a sector, or even your own organization performance. Okay, La? So, and what we do in the evaluation is it analyzes the level of achievement. Sometimes we evaluate to see what is our expected results. Along with that, evaluation also sometimes gives us ideas on what are the results which we didn't intend to produce, but because of the program, there is a result which is unexpected, and that's very important because we have to see if the program is very relevant or effective, if it is efficient, if it is coherent and well coordinated. Sometimes we also do a very rigorous evaluation by designing like the impact evaluation. And most important, what we look at is how sustainable a program can be. So what evaluation can help us to understand is it will give us an evidence, as Dr. Will said, what is the importance of data if you have to measure the SDGs. I know different countries are at the different levels of implementing and monitoring the SDGs. So it is very important to look at the findings, the evidence, and then also revise your own programs. So if that is how you improve your programming, you achieve more results, and we later on you'll see that there is a timeline to also achieve SDGs. So we have to keep monitoring the SDGs as we go ahead implementing the program. Any question till this part? If not, can we go to the next slide? It is very similar because I understand that most of you are quite new to the evaluation, so I kept on repeating. So evaluation basically promotes learning to improve our program. It also holds people accountable because if a government is implementing an SDG, if they have signed in for the SDG implementation, and I think it's very important that we also hold them accountability, and how? With the help of evaluation. Because when we evaluate, we find out whether we are on a track or whether we are off track, whether we are below other countries or whether we are overperforming. If overperforming, then all the better, mushla. So we also look at whether there is a change in impacts. Sometimes, as an evaluator, I have to hold back my colleagues and say, like, okay, you are not achieving these results anymore. You need to revise your program. So this is how evaluation helps us, and that is the big reason why we have to conduct an evaluation. Next slide, please. And just wanted to give a very quick idea on some of the key steps in how to manage your evaluation, because most of you all, if you are working in any organization and if you are given a task to manage an evaluation, this is a simple process, steps. So we have to see whether we need this utility and evaluability. We need to determine if we need this evaluation or not. Sometimes people just do 1 year programming and then they try to evaluate. So we really need to see, is it a donor driven, whether you require it or not. So that is the first thing. And once you know that, okay, we need this evaluation, then you need to do a little bit of planning and costing the evaluation. Basically, what we do is we write a concept note, then we write a TR, we set up the evaluation questions and the criteria. Then the step 3 is basically managing the inception phase, like recruiting a consultant, discussing with your stakeholders. Dr. Will mentioned earlier that it's very important to bring in stakeholders if we need to achieve SDGs, because SDG means everybody counts and no one is left behind, right? So once we have the inception phase done, agreed on, then it comes the implementation of the evaluation. What we do is we collect the information, we talk to people, we talk to our beneficiaries. Like even, for example, Bhutan right now is doing an evaluation of inclusive education. We talk to the students themselves because they are also, we are not leaving anyone behind. So that is the idea of achieving SDGs. We need to talk to everyone so that they are not left behind. So we have to be very careful because there are some sectors, some section of the population which are left behind as the development moves very fast. So many times also the 5th step, the last one, is to use the evaluation findings, because we need to learn from what came out of the evaluation. And if a program manager is not performing well, or if the program is not as effective to achieve SDG, then we need to hold them accountable. We'll say that, okay, accountable here doesn't mean we are going to punish. We just say that, okay, your results are not going to come out if you continue, your SDG will not be achieved if you continue doing this program. Please review, revise, and then let's revise the program and then try to implement the revised program. Okay, until here, anybody wants to say anything or add on? I know we have expertise from other countries as well. So if anybody wants to come in, chip in, please feel free. Just unmute yourself. Okay, please come in.
Can I come in here?
Yes.
You have mentioned that currently, you are conducting inclusive education evaluation, right? So then, I was thinking, when you do this kind of evaluation at the home, it is very important for any kind of evaluation. It is very important to be culturally responsive, I believe, and then to know, exactly to know for whom you are evaluating, and in that matter also it also matters so much about who are the evaluators in this kind of program. So I would think that how culturally responsive this evaluation has been so far, even not only for the inclusive education, there are many evaluation that your organization would have done in the past, right? So I wonder how culturally responsive the team is, and also the how your evaluation is being done. If you can share a little bit on that.
Thank you, Madam Pinso, for your question. I think very relevant. Yes, we as an evaluator has to be very sensitive to the cultural aspects. Many times, for example, right now when we are planning this evaluation for inclusive education, then we need to go a little bit slow with persons with disabilities. We have to ensure that we have a local consultant working in the field and not because we need to understand the local aspects. So we don't put an international consultant in the field because then the whole idea of being cultural sensitive is being lost. So the local consultant, he will try to see how to build rapport, which places are, I mean, for example, I'll just give an example of how we are trying to be very sensitive. If you speakers, so in the east, what we put is we put the people who can speak Shachuk, so that they don't put people under pressure. The people are like okay with talking to evaluators who can speak their own language to a student, and then we talk to the parents, we talk to the caregivers to ensure that they are very comfortable and they are okay talking to the evaluators. So a lot of ethical issues and the cultural sensitivity are taken into account as we plan and implement, especially during the implementation phase. You are happy with the answer? Any more?
Thank you so much, Dechen, for sharing your experiences with us.
We would like to hear from other countries, or young evaluators from other countries. If anybody is willing to unmute. Okay, then we go ahead. So now I'm sure, because I just wanted to put up this slide. Maybe some people may not be, some participants may not be aware or may have forgotten the SDG goals. It's very important that we keep an eye on the goals itself. You can already see there are 17 goals. Okay, so I don't know which goal you work on. Can anybody tell which goal you work on? Your organization, yourself, even if you're a student also, you might be working on some projects. So can you relate yourself to any of the goals? Okay. So, however, as you work, I think we must be working to achieve all this SDG. Sometimes it's not so apparent, like, I work for SDG 3, 4, but somehow you contribute to it. So we can see that number 1 is no poverty, number 2 is zero hunger, number 3 is good health and well-being. So I don't want to read it, but I can share the slides later if you are interested. Next slide, please. So what are they? They are also known as SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. They are also known as Agenda 2030. It is actually signed by 169 countries. I am sure our participants from other countries are also aware that your country might have been signed. And as I was saying earlier, it has a timeline. That's why to keep evaluating the SDG is very important. To ensure that we achieve the SDGs by 2030. We have to monitor, we have to evaluate, we have to reprogram so that we achieve the 17 goals. The 17 goals, if we break down, I think we have 169 targets and 232 indicators. So these are used to measure the indicators. Next. So I think when you measure the SDGs or when you evaluate the SDGs, it's very important to keep focus on 5 Ps, the people. So actually, eventually, what we are going to do by achieving SDG means that we have left no one behind. So SDG is really about ensuring that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality in a very healthy environment. We have to think of the planet, protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production. We have to think about prosperity to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives. Peace, very important. Bhutan is a very peaceful country, but I understand there are so many countries where peace is much sorted feeling. So we have to foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. And partnership, Dr. Will already mentioned, we need to include everybody, the beneficiaries, the civil society organization, and us, even as an individual, I think we can also contribute to the SDGs. We have to mobilize the means required to implement this agenda. So at a very big level, the agencies, the UN agencies, the donor agencies, they all try to mobilize the resources. CSOs, they also put their efforts to mobilize resources. Individuals put their efforts. So I think focusing on the 5 P's is very important. Do you agree, La? Or disagree? You can even disagree. Please feel free to disagree. So if everybody is in agreement, let's move to the next slide. Okay. So now I think coming to the main point, evaluation should play a very crucial role to support effective and efficient SDG implementation. Evaluation will offer evidence-based learning on how policies and programs are delivered, results, and what needs to be done differently. So that's why we're saying with no one left behind lens, evaluation should be equity focused and very gender responsive. Next slide. So how do we actually see SDGs in the country? SDG is not something which sits on the paper or in a signed agreement, but it is actually implemented as a program. It increases, sometimes it differs for size, the scope, even the number of stakeholders involved. And as SDG implementation, it calls in all stakeholders. Sometimes it becomes very complex to evaluate SDGs. So larger program can also become increasingly affected by political, right? The economic, the ecological, sociocultural, and other elements of the local, regional, national, and international context within which they operate. So implementing a SDG is a very complex issue. And evaluating the SDG is more complex. Let's go ahead with the other slides so you can see how I put it. So that's why as a SDG evaluator, you have to draw on experience. You have to look at evaluation agencies to implement, who are involved in SDG, to identify, to test, to operationalize approaches that can address the challenges of complexity, while at the same time sufficiently simple and economical to be applicable throughout the program implementing the SDGs. So evaluators have more challenge, but we can also keep it very simple. Next slide. So given the broad range of SDG goals and the fact that there are multiple programs being implemented in each country by hundreds, sometimes thousands of different agencies, the overall SDG in each country are likely to be rated high on overall complexity. So it's very quite complex, as I said earlier, because of the involvement of different agencies, including individuals. So there are, of course, many small, it's not that it's always complex. So there are also, of course, many small and simple approaches, like providing one or few clearly defined services in small number of communities. But when all the programs are combined, then only the complexity rapidly increases. So that's why in the earlier slide, I said, like, it can be implemented, the evaluation can happen at the activity level, a project level, and then at a very high level, system level. Next slide. So what is important as an evaluator is very important if you want to achieve SDG, to look at the size of the program. You have to look at the stability of the program design, how the program was designed. For example, SDG 5, which is on gender equality, right, is likely to contain a large proportion of new and experimental programs promoting gender equality and women empowerment. Later on, I will show, there's one slide which is very specifically focusing on the SDG 5 and what to consider when we do evaluation of such a complex SDG goal. We also have to look if the program is designed well, and if it is clearly defined. Otherwise, it is very difficult to evaluate. Okay, next slide. We have to also look at the services and the components, because they have like some program have few components, others have multiple components and services. And if you have to, for example, gender equality involves lots of organization. Even for I don't know about other countries, for even in Bhutan, we have so many CSOs. We have a government organization who are working on gender, promoting gender, and trying to achieve gender equality. So sometimes social complexity is there, as our Pinso has mentioned, the cultural component, social norms. We also have to look at what are the cultural norms that that hold back the progress of a program to achieve the SDGs, and duration. So sometimes we just, they implement for 1 year and they said, oh, we want to see the results, we want to see the results. So as an evaluator, you also have to consider how long the program has been implemented to be able to see the results. Next slide. So this is a case example I have taken out from one of the UNICEF's work. This is what we follow in UNICEF, the 5 principles of integrating gender into evaluations and to achieve SDG 5, which is gender equality. Mashallah. So what is important is we have to be very, as an evaluator, we have to be very transformative. We have to seek to reduce gender equalities and support gender transformative change. As an evaluator, you have to be very bold and tell people that, okay, we evaluated this gender program and it's not going to change. So you have to raise your voice and be very transformative, be participatory and inclusive. We have to include all those stakeholders who are involved, including individuals, including beneficiaries if possible, so that it becomes inclusive and then everybody's voice is heard. We have to promote women's rights and empowerment. Once we have found that, okay, the program is focused only on on man, or if it is like, if the program is neutral, then we have to tell them that, okay, this program has to be gender sensitive. So we have to, even for that matter, we have to include women and girls in your planning stages, in your evaluation stages. So we always consider, when in UNICEF, when we do evaluation, we always consider that women and girls, even boys for that matter, are included in the process. Even people with disabilities, we include in our process if it is related to them. Be innovative. Nowadays, with the COVID, I understand it's very difficult to face-to-face. So we do a lot of innovation also around, like we do telephonic interviews to get their voices heard. Technology, basically. And we have to be very intentional. We have to, when you plan evaluation, we have to articulate the purpose of how we are going to improve the work on gender equality. So these are the 5 components that we use when we design and implement evaluation related to gender. Next slide. So before I go to the key messages, if anybody wants to unmute and have a discussion, please let us know. We'd like to hear from other countries, the young participants from other countries. How evaluation is being done, or you have any idea? Do you have any idea on SDGs? So if you cannot if you don't want to speak on the mic, you can also write down on the chat box. Okay, we have one question to Dr. Wilcox. Can Sonam or does she read out?
Yes, ma'am. I think the question is from Dr. Park to Madam Dechen. Generally, in many development countries, what, how, and from whom evaluation take place largely ignore local knowledge, philosophies, and relatives. Could you share your presentation on these issues from SDGs and GNH lenses?
Yes, I think very rightly said, Dr. Wilpass. Sometimes we ignore the local knowledge. For example, we go to a place and just for example, I'll take a case of a disaster management. If you're going to evaluate a disaster management, if you're evaluating a disaster management project, sometimes it is we design in such a way that if you don't talk to the local people, then what happens is they will also like have different ideas that we might not understand that the programming will happen at this kind of at this point of time. I'll just give an example on GNH. When we do the survey of GNH, if we are doing the survey towards the harvesting time, the people are more happy. The survey shows that the people are more happy, and if you are doing towards the dry season when people are not having much of their income, then it becomes a little bit difficult to show a high rate of happiness. Gross national happiness, as you may be knowing, it is also a very holistic and sustainable approach to development. And we always don't talk about materials when we talk about GNH. We talk about non-materials values that human want to search for happiness. So basically, the GNH, with the GNH, we try to achieve a balanced, not always a progress on materials and developments and hundreds of bridges. Even if you have constructed, if you do not achieve the happiness, if you do not consider people's philosophies, people's concepts, so these is there later on with lots of slides on GNH. Otherwise, we can always come back.
There was some misunderstanding here.
Thank you, ma'am. Dechen. I think Dr. Will, if you're still there, the same question goes to you. I think the question was for Dr. Will also. Generally, in many development countries, what, how, and from whom evaluation take place largely ignore local knowledge, philosophies, and realities. Could you share your perspective on these issues from SDGs and GNH lens now? If Dr. Will could also answer to this question now.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think Dechen has answered it. There were two kind of philosophies in monitoring evaluation. One was a Western scientific extractive perspective, which was often external evaluators coming in to measure changes and imposing upon those who were the beneficiaries of development initiatives, imposing the methods, the questions, and the data collection tools, and then sometimes writing reports remotely, not sharing the findings. There was that philosophy, and then there was the much more participatory approaches that were originating out of particularly Latin America, which embodied a much more participatory ethos. So designing programs and asking evaluation questions in a co-creative process with beneficiaries, therefore tapping into local knowledge both in program design and in asking the right questions about what does change actually mean and who should measure it. I just added a link in the chat box to a document I wrote a long time back, but it basically covers a lot of the ground that I think Funcho's question is related to. So whilst it's a little bit out of date, possibly a resource that colleagues might enjoy, just to start with.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paz.
Thank you, Dr. Wills. We have one more question from Sonam Gelson to Madam Dechen. How do we ensure the extent of participatory and inclusivity in evaluation? Any method on it?
Yes, I think Dr. Will just shared this very good link on how to include how to be inclusive, how to make the evaluation participatory. For example, I'll just give a case example of the inclusive education that is being done right now. This school we have in Bhutan, we have few schools. We have around 23 schools who have implemented inclusive education in Bhutan. So we are trying to see if the program has been effective. So in the planning stage itself, we were talking, when we developed the TR, we try to see what could be the effect on them. And when we do the inception phase, we ask them to join us. We make sure that we talk to them. We try to, for example, in our reference group meeting committee, we develop a reference group committee to ensure that, it is not just UNICEF and Minister of Education doing the evaluation. No, we don't do that. We put around 15, 16 stakeholders. Sometimes we even include for this because it's on disabilities. So we also include persons with disabilities. So they are right from the planning stage till the end, to the dissemination level, to the reprogramming level. We bring them on board. We walk the journey through with them. So in the inception phase, when we design the methodology, they want to say, for example, I'll say, okay, we only go to this school, few schools like in Thimphu. So they will say, no, we have people who are not, we have people with disabilities in other regions, in other districts, for example, Trashigang, yes, then they have the voice. So we try to keep as inclusive as possible throughout. Sometimes and we pay so much efforts in ensuring there's a gender balance, there's a cultural sensitivity. So all these components, at least I'm not sure about the government evaluation, but evaluation in UNICEF, we ensure that they are involved from planning stage. We talk to them throughout the process. They help us monitor. They help us review the findings, even to the extent that, if they are not in agreement, we also have to go back to the field and revisit and ensure that the voices are, recorded properly. So I think for me, I would think that if you follow stages which I have shown, like, for example, the case example in gender, being participatory, being transformative, raising their voice. So I think all this helps to ensure that there's a component of inclusivity as well as participatory. There is one evaluation, very interesting evaluation done in Nepal or India, I'm not sure, but one of the findings showed that if they actually tried, one of the recommendation was that women was to introduce the water tap in the village, because the women usually go with the group to walking few distance to get water. So even when water is brought to near the house, the women would still prefer to go to the place where they usually earlier used to collect the water. It's because why? Because these women, they enjoy going there. There is a group, they have their own spaces. So likewise, we have to be very, if you don't include women in that evaluation, so this is how the findings are not going to work. So I think this is just an example. Thank you. Dr. Will might have more expertise and more experience than me. So if Dr. Will want to come in?
No, that's okay. Thank you, Dechen. I don't think I have anything else to add.
Thank you. Any question before I conclude? Okay, Rohit.
Hello, Dechen. Hi, everyone. This just popped up as a random thought when you described about this study. I just wanted to, get everybody's, view on it. So let's say this project, the intent of this project was to reduce the time that women would allocate into collecting water or fetching water.
Yes.
And it is a water supply scheme project. And at the end, the water supply taps have been provided to homes. But as you say, women still prefer to go to the source from where they can collect, because they would enjoy that time being spent. Now, how do you evaluate the success of this project? Because the baseline says that they spent 30 minutes or 45 minutes every day into going and collecting. And now at the end of the project also, because they continue with this habit of going and collecting, the time in terms of fetching the water remains same. The project has delivered the output of having the water supply taps at their place. So how do you evaluate the success of this project now?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, Rohit. Thank you for raising it. Yes, the project sometimes it always doesn't mean that achieving the results is beneficiary for the women. So that is where the cultural component, where the values as the evaluators need to come in. Sometimes even me, I am evaluator. I just want to see the results, and I'm not really sure if I'll just measure it in in degree or percentage, and I'll leave. But then eventually, when we do the eventually the program people will realize that okay, this program, even if you do the evaluation, even if I have the findings, even if the results is achieved, if it is not going to benefit the women, then I think we would say the project has not achieved its results. So they would still want to spend 30 minutes going out. So the evaluation shows that bringing in the tab is not an effective way of empowering or achieving gender equality. So that's how I see as as an evaluator. But as a non-evaluator, things will the measurement of the results will be a bit different from a hardcore evaluator like myself. I'll just say, okay, done. You are given this project. This project has achieved the results. Then after that, I'll leave, and then the rest of the things coming on the program, and they're saying that okay, let's maybe this is not the best way of achieving the results. So let them collect the water. We maybe we'll do it differently, So I would say that's my point of view. Any views from anybody else? Okay, if no, thank you, Rohit. So the last key message I have again is I'm just coming back to the same point. Evaluation is very important. Evaluation helps us to build knowledge and improve better programming to achieve the SDGs. So the tabs are not going to achieve the SDGs. The empowerment of women is going to achieve the SDG 5. It's about women equality. Women find their own time. Women find their own voices. And evaluation findings and recommendations should be widely disseminated using appropriate methods. Sometimes we disseminate just in English, and it's not benefiting the community, because they don't read English. So you have to be very culturally sensitive. We have to go to them, make the findings as simple as possible, and then talk to them or tell them that these are the findings. You should do the other way around. So it is also like it helps us to determine, because there are a lot of people who contribute to SDG achievement. If you do the evaluation, you will see who contributed how much. So this kind of evaluation can also be designed, and use of evaluation criteria is very appropriate. This is technical, so I'll leave it out. And the focus again on is that the case example that we saw. The key message from there is that gender responsive evaluation will help ascertain that what has worked and what didn't work. Very good example given by Rohit, including progress towards gender equality and empowerment of the women. So I will leave it here, open the floor for discussion, right, Tashi? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am Dechen. We have one more question from Erica. She's from Philippines, and I would like to add up an introduction for her. She's also one of the co-leader of Evaluate. Her question is, she wanted to know if there's any unique examples on how COVID has affected your conduct of evaluation and how you overcame it.
Very, very good question. Thank you, Anna, Erica. Yes, COVID, we have managed to conduct at least 2 evaluations during this COVID period. And I would say it is not easy. a lot of time when we actually feel more comfortable when we sit around the people, right, face to face, talking to each other, and planning and implementing an evaluation. However, during the COVID time, we have lots of lockdowns, and during that time, we still kept on, doing evaluation. We did do evaluation in this way, and it does affect. There is a delay in timing. There is an increased cost. Sometimes unanticipated cost also comes in. I'll just give a few examples of the rapid pulse survey that we have done. It's just like an evaluation, especially on the methodology, because I think your interest is on that. So what we did was we switched over to telephonic interviews. We do a lot of e-questionnaire. We try to send out the e-questionnaire to them through their emails. We already collect their telephone numbers, contact them. We use WhatsApp. And I think this may be a little bit cost intensive. And however, we managed to conduct the evaluation. So this was, for example, the evaluation that we are going to do right now. We have two methodology. One, if there's no COVID, if you're allowed to go to the field, we will do the face-to-face interview. If then we have, a backup plan, saying if we cannot go to the talk to people, then we have switch over to the other methodology like telephonic interviews. I can share a very good case study done by our regional office on how to conduct evaluation during pandemic times. Would you be interested? If you're interested, I could share it. So as an evaluator, for me, whether there's a COVID or not, I keep on going and I try to adjust as I go ahead. I hope that's satisfactory. Dr. Will want to add, Pinto? Anybody can add, because this is just one example. You might have done differently also.
Thank you, Ma'am Dechen. If Dr. Wills or Dr. Finso or any other expertise or the participants would like to add on, you're most welcome now.
Okay, thank you very much for all your ears. This meeting actually could have happened face to face. However, this is, as I said, a backup plan, doing over the Skype. I think it's also like, I felt very participatory, and thank you for participating and listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Dechen, for your detailed presentations, such as giving clear idea on what is accountabilities and highlighting on the 17th Sustainable Goal. And I'm sure all of us are now aware of the importance of M&E in achieving SDGs, as Madam has clearly shared with the case example. Moreover, since few of our participants are very new to the concept of monitoring and evaluation, by now you must have probably got some ideas on the M&E, and it's important through these presentations. And yeah, I will try to get the case study from Madam Dechen and share to those who are interested. Now I will directly jump into our next speaker. Our next speaker is Sir Chhimi Dorji. Sir Chhimi holds and master in environmental systems, energy, environment, and society. His birth degree are Bachelor in Civil Engineering from India and a postgraduate course in Energy Planning and Sustainable Development. Sir Chhimi has worked in the USA as a researcher and Bhutan as a civil servant for a decade. Since the last 6 years, he has been working as a consultant on energy, environment, and water resources project in Bhutan and South Asia. Chhimi has been a national evaluation expert and evaluated projects on renewable energy, water resources, climate change, electric cars, and curriculum development. Over to you, Lisa. Are you there, Lisa?
Hello?
Chhimi sir, are you there, la, sir? I think you're.
Kamshi develop nakatatangagi ani table content is update by print.
Sir, I think you're mute, la. Can you unmute, la, sir?
We're trying to get in. And you're still uncomfortable putting it in the chat box, then you may email to us at evaluatebhutan@gmail.com.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I had some issues with my network. I hope I am audible.
Yes, la, sir.
Okay, Lasla, thank you. So I will start with my thing. So I am a consultant, as mentioned earlier, and next one, please. In this one, I will basically cover a little short introduction on what is sustainable development and what are some SDG concepts or the actual goals that I work on, which includes water, energy, climate, and waste, and a short takeaway message for the benefit of our participants here. Next. And next one. As far as we talked a lot about SDGs by our former speakers. They are basically aligning or the segue from the concept of sustainable development, which is basically an approach that ensures that we are able to develop and provide or get our current goods and services without compromising the ability of our future generation, and in which wherein we look at both the society, the environment, and the economy as well, and making sure that we are looking at this three dimensions and the various other cross-sectoral aspects. And this is particularly important because, of course, then this is also undergoing changes because we need to look at when we are doing certain activities or development concepts are carried forward, the system should be holistic, the objective should be comprehensive. And next. And the SDGs that was introduced by Dr. Will and then also by Madam Dechen earlier are all here. As far as I am concerned, as a national consultant here in Bhutan, just to share experiences, I predominantly work on SDG 6, which is affordable and clean energy, 7 on SDG clean water and sanitation, and then also on climate action and sustainable consumption. Next one. So the SDG 6 on water and sanitation is one of the most important works that I work on, and it is more or less has certain relationship with all the SDGs. I'll not go into the details, but as far as water and sanitations are concerned, it is has a lot to do with sustainable development and human well-being. Next one. We need to look into water from various aspects. First one, from a resource availability, because water is, as much as we like a huge portion of the earth is covered with water, but then when we really look at the hydrosphere itself, 90% of it is saline, which is not really fit for human consumption or use. That's why the actual surface water and fresh water availability is quite limited, and that's why we need to pay attention to it. Next one. And when we are talking about water and water availability and evaluation of water related projects for achieving the sustainable development goal of water and sanitation. Now, one thing that we usually ask is, okay, is the water source reliable? Is it clean? And is it adequate in terms of water supply? Uh, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, sanitation aspects are also necessary to looked into to see the facilities, the accessibility that our people have. So when we do projects across Bhutan, we try to look at, okay, what is the water availability and how much, because as we can see in the picture here, just having the water taps in front of the house is not important. We also need to see if the taps are running dry and if they have water as and when needed, and then also in terms of availability of toilets, and then if the septic waste are treated or untreated. Then when we are talking about water, as I mentioned earlier, we also look at quite often at the actual water quantity and quality. So as the guy in orange here is doing, trying to check at what is the water quality or water quantity, depth, velocity, so that we keep track of what's happening. And then when we are talking about network and frequency, there are systems set up across the country and across different field of studies to look at water using different equipment or satellite images to see and look at water. Next one. And then in terms of water, for Bhutan's context, one of the most important use of water in our context is hydropower development, since it is the main source of our electricity. A lot of our electricity is exported and it contributes close to 20% of our GDP. And it has helped more because of our abundant forest coverage. And we claim ourselves to be carbon neutral, carbon negative rather. And then it has also been widely shared by our former Prime Minister that Bhutan is not just carbon neutral, but it's rather negative. There is a short a link to the YouTube video where we claim about how we have been able to, what we have been able to do so far, and what we could do together. Next one. And the next domain that we are thinking is again the water energy nexus. So hydropower is both a energy and also a water. But again, moving on to other forms of energy in Bhutan's context, I quite often work on rural electrification projects. I mean, and some of them being like as recent as being in 2021, and even flying across the country. Yes, next one, where different challenges are encountered because we need to ensure that the energy used in homes are clean and reliable as well. And then when we're talking about evaluation, we evaluate if the projects have been done accordingly, so which is coming up next. And so different limitations to different dimensions of the SDGs. Next one. And this is again sustainable micro community micro hydro for sustainable livelihoods. So in which we developed a hydropower was developed and handed over to the community for operation and maintenance, and the community was living off this homegrown clean energy. And so as evaluators, what we evaluate here is, okay, what was the status before the hydropower project? How has it helped? And then also, how did the project really stimulate livelihood activities? Because quite often we claim that just having electricity would alleviate poverty. But okay, what kind of interventions and activities were done uh, to improve it further? Next one. The recent concepts or issues in our context of energy is also, we are a predominantly, although we, Bhutan's case, we claim ourselves to export 80% of hydropower electricity, and also that we are a clean and country. But on the other hand, we import a lot of fossil fuels. So the strategy that the government has taken up is to promote electric vehicles. And in one of my recent projects, I evaluated a EV project, which is to promote low emission carbon development in Bhutan's context. And we have been able to look at the various forms of uh, the various aspects of how the project was able to progress. The next one. And that was again to explain the process little bit, as Madam Dechen mentioned earlier. When we're talking about evaluation, we do it both through desk reviews, through one-to-one discussions, and also focus group discussions such as this one, a multi-sectoral approach to hearing from everyone and from all sectors. Next one. And so when it concerns this particular EV project, we found out that the banks are providing 70% of loans for procurement of EV vehicles, and also increase the loan tenure from 5 to 7 years, which is unprecedented in Bhutan's case. And then also there is cost subsidy for the actual purchase of vehicles to taxi drivers. Close to $4,000 were just given as cost subsidy from the project. And there is zero tax on the import of the EVs. The charging station networks are also being expanded, even looking at public-private partnership models. And then also there are issues such as developing of curriculum for training and operation for EVs and charging stations, and eventually try and make the country self-reliant and carbon negative. As I was saying earlier, these are done in the context to ensure that we are using clean energy and the low carbon development that is there. Next one. And then the other initiatives as far as clean energy are concerned. So I've also been evaluating some projects related to that are dependent on renewable energy resources such as wind and solar. On the left, if project that is funded by the Asian Development Bank, the two wind turbines, pilot wind turbines, and besides it, we see the solar PV systems, the first one of its kind in the country, which are grid integrated. And then also we see a woman operator working on a solar grid on top of a roof. So basically on-site energy systems that are being promoted by country, we look into them as well. Next one. And when we are evaluating this particular SDG goal, uh, what would we usually look at? So we see, okay, are they clean in terms of energy? Are they sustainable? And are they reliable? And then also, are they expensive? Because no matter what technology or concept we bring in, if they are expensive, if they are not economically viable, as I mentioned earlier, even if we have the smoothest car on the road or the most cleanest form of energy, if they are not economically viable, it's not going to take off, because we cannot keep on having subsidies and support from the government. So at the same time, then the next one is technically suitable and appropriate technologies that are required. In the picture, we see that we also quite often work on clean energy stoves across Bhutan, and also fuel wood substitution. And so in that particular household, the predominant fuel was fuel wood, and we can see the condition of the kitchen uh, almost colored in black. So we can imagine the health implications this would have. And then this is again tying back into the aspect I was telling earlier, where the concept of, okay, we are talking about energy, we're also talking about water and human health as well. Next one. And moving on with the next SDG that I usually work on is on climate change, which is because of the greenhouse gas effect. So for the sake of time, I will not go into the details. So basically, climate change happens because of increase in greenhouse gas contributions, especially because of anthropogenic activities such as our industries or burning of fossil fuels, and which then increase the global temperature. Next one. And what we see across the country, across in Bhutan and also globally, next one, are the impacts where global temperatures are increased, sea levels are increasing. We see more cyclones, floods, droughts, and also impact on air quality, human health, animal health, and also on biodiversity. Next one. And we have been observing a lot of practically changing adaptation measures by people to climate change. Okay, next one. And as far as Bhutan's vulnerability to climate change is concerned, since we are a small country with less economic power and resilience, and then also being up on the Himalayan fragile ecosystem by the topography, but with a huge biodiversity, we with a high density of biodiversity richness, we are even more susceptible than other countries. The water resources in terms of glaciers or glacial lakes or rivers are at risk. Similarly, our forest and biodiversity, agriculture and food self-sufficiency, and then the main impact on the hydropower sector, as I mentioned earlier, uh, are at risk due to climate change. Next one. And this is again is just a pictorial representation of how climate is changing in Bhutan through a repeat photography done by some Japanese in 1984, 1999, and by a Bhutanese colleague in 2009, where we see that our glaciers are retreating and glacial lakes are being formed, which is more like that. So we are having more and more of such lakes, which are a potential threat in the near future. Next one. And when we are talking about climate change, we also look at two things. Because the temperature is increasing and the situation is changing. So, how do we prevent from being negatively impacted? There are basically two things when it comes to protecting ourselves. One is to mitigate. So, Mr. Frog here in the middle picture, so the pot is getting heated up, and what is he doing? He is moving away the fuel wood that is heating up the pot. So that means that he's preventing that greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, uh, wherein the technical terminology is called climate change mitigation. So avoiding climate change from happening. And then on the last picture on the right, what is the Mr. Fogg doing there? He has nicely put in a new boat, the Ark, and sleeping on it. So he is more or less assuming the fact that, okay, the temperature is changing, the rainfalls are becoming more erratic, there are more floods, the glaciers are melting. So what can I do? I adapt myself to this new scenario with a little boat and trying to live with this new condition. So this is in technical context called climate change adaptation. So living with this new environment. Next one. When we evaluate climate change related projects, so when we do evaluate mitigation projects, what do? We mostly our projects are predominantly climate change mitigation projects. We look at how much of greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced by the project in the most efficient manner. So I was telling about the Cookstove project, which is both an energy project and then also a climate change mitigation project. Similarly, the hydropower or the EVs or the uh, solar or the wind. So, okay, they provide clean, renewable energy, reliable, clean, as I said earlier, and then also sustainable. But at the same time, how much of greenhouse gas emission reductions can these projects do? So, if we are replacing a petrol powered taxi by a new electric vehicle, so what's happening? We are not just providing it's not just an energy project. So we are, from an energy dimension, we are using this locally available hydropower electricity to fuel the taxi instead of buying importing the dirty petrol. That's one. Two, when we burn fossil fuels such as petrol, there is this greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And now, when we are switching this taxi to a EV, there is no emission. So qualifies as a greenhouse gas emission project, which then helps it as a climate change mitigation project. Then the other one type of projects that I mentioned, adaptation projects. Now, I briefly mention what are adaptation projects. So when we do adaptation evaluation of adaptation projects, we basically look at how has the project made the community that where the project has occurred, or the households that are there, or the country as a whole more resilient to the changed environment. So a classical example of a climate change project would be a flood retention wall to prevent uh, floods from coming into a particular village or a town. When we evaluate that project, we will evaluate to see, okay, has the local resources been used to the optimum possible, or is it economically has been the most effective, efficient manner? And then at the same time, look at, okay, are the community now safer than before due to the project intervention? So these are the types of that we try to get answered when we evaluate the projects. Uh, to a large extent, when this kind of projects are designed, it is expected that the project developers do look into those aspects of, okay, we are pumping in this many nultrums of money for the solar project, then we will be providing better, cleaner electricity to the village, but at the same time, replacing the fossil fuel wood consumption and also making the homes cleaner. But at the same time, this is the greenhouse gas emission that we will reduce. And then as evaluators, when we go there, we try to see, okay, is A done, B done, C done? So that's how it is being done. Next one. And lastly, but not the least, coming to this SDG on sustainable consumption and waste, uh, I have to admit I do not work on the consumption itself as much, but I work a lot on the waste sector itself, and it is becoming a very, very important topic in our context, in Bhutan's context. Uh, Point number one, because the cash disposal cash of income of people are increasing, which is good. GDP is increasing, people are thriving, so they have more money to buy more Huawei's and lays from Thailand and so on and so forth, and also drinking bottled water every even at home or in the office on a regular day as well, because people have now more money to spend, and but at the same time, the type of goods that goods and services that we're consuming are also changing, which are uh, worse for the environment, and then population increase itself, especially in the urban areas, leading to all this waste issues that I have shown here in the picture are not new to, I don't think, any one of us here. So these are changing, and when we are looking at waste projects, we try to look at them from a integrated waste management perspective, from cradle to grave concept. Okay, where are the waste generated, and how can we look at actually trying to reduce waste in the first place? And this reminds me of a professor of mine saying that what is the most energy efficient bulb? Is the bulb, not the LED bulb or the CFL or whatever, is the bulb that is turned off. And now, similarly, what is the most uh, environmentally friendly coffee cup? Is the cup that we do not throw away, right? So likewise, when we're talking about sustainable consumption, and as Madam Dechen and Dr. Will also mentioned earlier, a lot of this already ties in with our concept of gross national happiness, wherein, and then our because we are talking about less is better, and then also in terms of our traditional practices. A few days ago, I was teaching a group of officers on waste consumption, and we were showing them how traditionally we used to carry our own uh, palang for wine and our own coffee cups or bottled water. And now it has become a fashion to buy bottled water off the street. And whenever you're going for a picnic or even in office, people are resorting to that, even in meetings or workshops. So things that are preventable. So and then when we evaluate these projects, we try to look at from a circular economy concept. A circular economy concept is the concept in which we try to reduce reuse at each step of production to use to transport to eventual disposal. Next one. And do we want a future like this where the West is taller than our buildings and our rivers are filled up? I mean, I was just browsing on Facebook, I think, few hours ago, and they were saying if you do not do anything by 2040 or something, the Olympic would also be swimming in waters like this, right? So it's in our hand, and we try to work on those dimensions as well. Next one. And in conclusion, I would also like to supplement my previous speakers in trying to mention that I would also see that the sustainable development is very, very closely linked to our own national development philosophy or gross national happiness, which Sonam very well mentioned in the starting uh, and explained as well. And then to a certain extent, we also believe that it's beyond the the beyond the SDG goals. GNH is beyond uh, SDGs. And by 2030, we would hopefully have all this achieved. And for that to happen, we should ensure that we are a socially just and an environmentally friendly, but also economically realigned animal in Bhutan's context, in Thimphu, Paro, or even South Asia, or as a global community. And evaluation of these components or various components of SDGs are oh, required, indispensable to keep us on track and so that we can plan better. Now, going back to my EV or stove or water supply projects that I mentioned, in quite a number of projects, I have to admit that we have been able to make strategic, timely recommendations to implementing partners so that the project was able to, especially when we're doing midterm reviews, the projects were able to twist and align, realign, and strategize themselves so that the resources are used more effectively and efficiently to ensure that the SDGs are indeed achieved. Uh, this comes to the end of my presentation. And if there are any thoughts or questions, I'll be happy to take on. And all over to the moderators, please.
Thank you, sir, for the interesting session. Having worked for so long in the areas of monitoring and evaluations of projects and programs, both in country and abroad, Chhimi sir shared with us his wide range of experiences. So some of the areas of his works includes like water, energy, climate, and waste, which are directly linked to the SDGs. To sum up the presentation, the speaker repeated that evaluations would help us keep on track and plan better for optimum resources, efficiency, and time effectiveness. Thank you so much, sir. Now it's over to Sonam.
Thank you, Chhimi sir and Deshi. Do we have any questions for Chhimi sir? If we do, then you may unmute yourself or you may post your question in our chat box.
I have a question here. Can I come in? Um, Thank you, Chhimi, for a very extensive and very beautiful presentation. And also, you shared your experiences, at least in 3 SDG goals, which are very, very essential for human well-being. And and um, and again, like you shared all like how you have done the evaluation and very comprehensively. So I have a small request here. Like if you could share also like your experiences in use of those evaluation you have done. Like for example, like how the learnings taken have helped in the policy formulation or in implementing the other projects. So if you can share at least a small example that happened in Bhutan, the improvement that evaluation have brought to the policy arena or in the implementation, so that our evaluators, like especially our young evaluators, could understand what evaluation can do. So if you can briefly like give some example and share your experience, how effective one of your evaluation has become to improve the activity in our country. Yeah, that would be very thankful. Thank you.
Let's thank you, Madam Funso, for this question as well, and for your kind words, and then to Tashi and Sonam as well. To give one particular example, I mean, as you can understand, there are many more. Whenever we do evaluations, we try to find out what has really gone well and what has not gone well. I have to admit that I also had opportunities to, fortunately so far, of educate experiences where, okay, these are good things that we can replicate. And so maybe I can give one example where things were done quite well. In the energy sector, because I worked in the energy sector even when I was working in the government, in the past, in many cases, what we used to see is that uh, if it is a solar rooftop system, or even for cook stoves, what used to happen is that the government will government department in many cases, with the help of maybe the women's association of Bhutan or some school teachers, help come the cook stove or install the solar panels for the households. And when we have evaluated those projects, when I was in the government, what we have seen is that 3 years down the line, and it's actually quite sad, because they need the stove, they need the solar PV for themselves, but our people in the different parts of the country, because it is a freebie that they have received, they do not have this as much sense of responsibility, because they think that it has come for free. And when this PV panel goes bad, or when this stove breaks down, we will again submit another request to the government through our local leaders, and we'll get another set. That was quite common before. And then, but fortunately, by the time we have started working as professionals, back in 2007, 5 onwards to 2010 up to 11, this has been quite observed quite frequently. And then this is what we also seeing globally, in especially in this, the southern part of the world, the south side. And then the government of Bhutan, with our development partners, including the UN, obviously, has started making uh, this strategic move to do cost sharing basis. So now, if you look at projects in the energy sector, and we none of the projects are given as freebies. So maybe the cost of the material is from the government, but the labor is contributed, and sometimes they also have to chip in some money. And quite often they are also made to form community groups. The Senghor micro hydropower project that I mentioned, in the past, what used to happen is this kind of micro hydro systems were completely managed by a government department or a corporation from the central, and the community was just using the electricity and paying some bills. Their hands were washed off after the project. But in that case, the community was involved directly. And then also with new cook stove projects, new PV projects, there is a strong sense of cost sharing. And I believe this is something that we need to remember. And then maybe this would also be different, maybe for our participants from other countries. I'm sure the situation is different. In Bhutan's context, we have seen it in various parts of the country that uh, people have different socio-economic contexts. So maybe the degree of their participation needs to be different, but that's how it could be done now. And then also, uh, in terms of water supply, what I have seen is that in one water supply project done by NGO, so the NGO has come in and with the field officers done the water supply project, and the water supply source was identified. They have identified a local plumber to do it. And 1 year later, when we went for the evaluation, the plumber was there, but the water supply was very erratic, and the water supply system was not good. So then we told the NGO here that this is not working, and they have immediately realized that they were supposed to form a group in the village to take care of the, almost like a water user association in the village. So that was not functional. So they had to revamp it, and I'm glad to report that after that, the water user association came on board. They were able to revive their lines, and the water supply system, the last I talked to, was working properly. So these are some few examples I was think I could share.
Thank you, Chhimi sir. Do we have any more questions from the participants for Chhimi sir?
Good evening, La. Good evening, Chhimi sir. Nice to have you here, La. My question is, I'll be very straightforward. I'll be very straightforward, and this may be a little uneasy question to respond. I completely leave that to you. Chimisa, because we are talking on SDGs as well as on GNH, but of course, GNH evaluations, I don't really know if we have had any other than the GNH surveys that they conduct. Talking about SDGs tied projects, have you faced instances when the agencies responsible and the agencies who have hired you to conduct the evaluation have asked you directly or indirectly to tweak the findings or to manipulate the findings, so to say, because this would invariably demonstrate the success of their project and perhaps the subsequent tranches of funding if it is phase-wise funding. Do you face that? Is that a reality for evaluators? And how do we professionally handle that? How do we ensure that our results are accepted by the agency as well as we get paid for the services? What is your experience so far?
Thank you, Rohit, and good to see you as well. So you're on spot, man. It's a very tough question for sure, but nevertheless, I think as young emerging evaluators, and then also as evaluators, even otherwise, as professionals, we get. I mean, I have to admit that yes, more than one. Quite often, we do land up in situations where the development partner or the office that we are working for wants us to paint a rosy picture of the evaluation that we have just carried out. And then you're right, also as consultants, we are dependent. Our final payment is subject to their approval, right? And then also the fact that the next we are working in a very small need society in our case. So the reality of the matter is that yes, quite often we do encounter this, and I will also admit the fact that even when I was working in the government, I had colleagues and senior officers who wanted the evaluation report of our evaluators to be tweaked to suit what we wanted to actually come out of the evaluation report. Now, as evaluators, I mean, this is something that we also quite often talk in the Evaluation Association of Bhutan's various uh, discussions as well. We have this code of conduct of evaluator that we should be just and fair and be transparent. And then quite often with the UN agencies especially, and then even with others, we have the evaluation code of conduct, and then the report also usually requires us to actually sign saying that we will abide by this code of conduct. So to a large extent, we will have to abide both those things, whether you like it or not. So you have to be honest and brutal. In my case also, I have been like that only, where black is black, white is white. But how do we usually present even a black thing to your counterpart? In my this professional short span of professional experience so far, I have been trying to encourage and bring on board even our project officers or development officers together, saying that just painting the rosy picture alone is not educate. We don't have to say that, okay, Mr. Sonam has not, as a project manager, has done a bad job. The water supply project in Samsi is very terrible. He has not oversight. No, we don't have to say that way. I think it is absolutely okay to say that the Samsi water supply is not working because you have seen it, or you have learned it, or you have been reported about it. And as evaluator, it is absolutely must that you present that fact. You can never ever say that if the Samsigi water supply is not working, you cannot say that it is working. But how do I say that Samsigi's water supply is saying? I should not say that Mr. Sonam, the project manager, is responsible, even if he had not been very good. uh, I should I would have put it up in such a way that, okay, the water supply in Samsi is not working as expected, but this is how it can be improved. These are the possible causes, and try to put it in such a context that no individual person is targeted or an individual household is targeted, because it may also be possible that you have been fed this information by a particular household. So our keeping the consent of our respondents also in mind, making sure that both the respondents and the project officers are also safe, because I'm sure they would have tried their best. And if you're evaluating a person for a personal performance, I think that's something else. But as evaluators, we evaluate the project, not the individuals. So drawing that line where you stand and mentioning the things that the project has not worked, and trying to look at it from a more holistic perspective, and then also bring the project officers and others on board to bring them on board and understand that I'm not blaming you, but I'm blaming the system and how it can be improved for the benefit of the project, if it is midterm or if there's opportunity to correct it, or in between. That was how I would see it, as a just a small suggestion, but I'm sure it would depend on different situations. And thank you, Dr. Will, for sharing that book as well.
Hello, sir. Thank you, Chhimi sir. And as Chhimi sir mentioned, thank you, Dr. Wills, for sharing your book. We'll also share Dr. Wills' short paper that has been shared with us. We'll share it after the session. So I think we're coming to the end of the session. But before we do the conclusion, since this was our first webinar, we would like to hear from other participants. How did it go, and maybe any suggestions and feedback for our next sessions.
Salam, if I can, and if there is no one else to talk, I'd like to ask another question. I'm sorry if we have time. I'd like to ask one.
Sure, sir, sure.
Yes. Thank you, Chhimi sir. That was very that was a good answer, and I really liked it. And I suppose that's the way it's supposed to be. And thank you for really bringing out that it doesn't have to be about people, but more so about the system. My question in particular is for Dr. Wills. Trying to just understand the system that we have. Perhaps you can speak on, with an example, on UNICEF or other UN agencies. What is the general practice in terms of post-project evaluations? So we have got the evaluation. I don't know if I'm terming this correctly, but what I intend by post-project evaluation is evaluation maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line after that project was carried out. I remember I did something like that during my study in Sri Lanka with regard to coastal rehabilitation program where they had supplied a lot of dustbins and other amenities in order to curb the waste problem. And we did that evaluation 3 years, 4 years later. That was when I had reached over there, and my professor initiated that. And the findings at that point in time were very different. So perhaps when the project evaluation was carried out at the end of the project, the results were very good. But did the project continue to benefit the beneficiaries? Did it live up to the expectation that the donors had? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later, do we have that practice in UNICEF or other agencies where we conduct that sort of evaluation? Much later after it was done. The next question, perhaps it's a request, I don't know, because it's to do with evaluate. I was thinking if there are practices where young evaluators such as myself and others who have joined this session will also get opportunities to work on evaluation projects, and that perhaps could be a requirement for every evaluation project that you conduct, where there's a lead evaluator supported by a bunch of small young evaluators. Then perhaps that would bring about movement for our professional growth, and if something like that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit. Ideally, everything should be evaluated post the end of particular interventions to consider question marks of gender equality, sustainability, and other alternative effects that have occurred because of the intervention. So that is the ideal that the UN agencies, in my experience, have always sought. For UNICEF, we don't particularly follow up on specific countries, but we normally do follow-up evaluations over a period of time after our different country program cycles have been completed. So a group of countries will be evaluated on a theme, whether that be education or health or nutrition, and that will examine data well past the end of particular UNICEF interventions in countries, and we work with government. Of course, the key to all of this is to make sure capacity is built within national systems and civil society, particularly to get evaluations done by national owners, local communities, to examine these kind of questions after the external agency has pulled out its support. So yes, UNICEF does that, but it's usually not on a particular country, but on a series of countries with a particular theme in mind. That said, of course, some of our larger operations in countries like Iraq, in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, in this region, and in other regions of the world, such as Iraq, as I mentioned, they do pull out particular evaluations and audits of UNICEF's operations in those countries, specifically to those nations. On the issue of involving young people, young up-and-coming evaluators, I think that's a great idea. I'm thoroughly supportive of it, and I've taken note of that. And I know the Dechen, our monitoring and evaluation officer, will have taken note of that, particularly for how we can involve young evaluators in Bhutan with forthcoming evaluations in the pipeline.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Wells. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohit sir and Dr. Will. Now we have come to the end of this session. We would like to apologize if you have any more questions. You can write to us at evaluatebhutan@gmail.com. And now we would like to thank all the speakers for sparing your precious time in sharing your valuable knowledge and experience in the field of M&E. We look forward for your continuous support. Thank you everyone for your great participation, and we hope you have enjoyed this session. Taking advantage of this session, may I take this opportunity to encourage the participants to join Evaluation Association of Bhutan and Evaluate Bhutan to learn more about M&E in Bhutan. In order for you to join the group, the link will be provided in the chat box. Tashi, please do that. If you have any questions, as said earlier, please post it in our Gmail. And we apologize for keeping you all beyond the time. Thank you once again. Stay well, stay safe, and stay hopeful until the next meet. Thank you, Karinche.